I thought the keys in my hand meant freedom, but when I turned into the driveway of the house I had secretly bought, I slammed on the brakes. A moving truck was already there, blocking my path. Strangers were hauling furniture inside, furniture that definitely was not mine. Standing in the doorway of my brand new life was my sister's husband, barking orders like he held the deed. I realized then that to them, what was mine was actually theirs. My name is Brielle Hartman. I am 34 years old, and for the last 7 years, I have worked as a landscape project manager for North Pine Civic Studio. My job is about boundaries. I look at a chaotic stretch of urban dirt, and I impose order upon it. I define where the pavement ends and where the green space begins. I calculate drainage slopes, so that when the storms come, the foundation holds. I understand structure. I understand that without a solid perimeter, everything eventually collapses into mud. That was why I bought the house at Cedar Ridge Bluffs. It was supposed to be my ultimate perimeter. I had spent 18 months scouting the location, analyzing the market trends, and quietly siphoning money from my salary into a separate high-yield savings account that my mother, Evelyn, did not know existed. I had signed the closing papers 3 days ago with a hand that trembled only slightly. The house was modern, clean, and terrifyingly expensive, but it was mine. It was a manifesto written in cedar and glass. It was the physical manifestation of the word no. I had scheduled my movers for 4 in the afternoon. I wanted to arrive early, around 2, to walk through the empty rooms one last time. I wanted to stand in the center of the living room, listen to the silence, and breathe in the smell of fresh paint and possibility before the boxes arrived. But as I turned my sedan onto the winding driveway that led up the bluff, the silence I had paid for was already dead. There was a truck parked on my driveway. It was not the professional, branded moving van I had hired. It was a rented monstrosity, the kind with dents in the side panels and mud caked on the wheel wells. It was parked crookedly, one tire crushing the edge of the new fescue grass I had paid extra to have sodded just last week. I stopped my car at the bottom of the drive. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. For a moment, my project manager brain tried to rationalize the data. Perhaps the previous owners had left something behind? Perhaps the staging company had made a scheduling error. Then I saw the sofa. 2 men in stained t-shirts were hauling a beige, overstuffed leather sofa up my front steps. It was a piece of furniture I knew intimately. It had a scratch on the left armrest from a cat that had died 5 years ago. It had a stain on the middle cushion from a spilled glass of red wine during Thanksgiving of 2019. It was my sister's sofa. My heart did not speed up. Instead, it slowed down into a heavy, cold thudding rhythm. I watched through the windshield as the men maneuvered the bulky, ugly object through my custom pivot front door. The house was a masterpiece of mid-century modern inspiration. Sharp angles, floor-to-ceiling windows, polished concrete floors, and they were filling it with the beige, soft, crumbling debris of my sister's chaotic life. I looked up at the main window, the one that offered the panoramic view of the valley. Standing there, framed by the glass like he was posing for a magazine cover, was Gavin Cross, my brother-in-law. He was wearing a navy blazer over a graphic t-shirt, holding a tablet in one hand and pointing with the other. He was gesturing to someone inside, directing the placement of furniture with the authoritative snap of a CEO closing a merger. Except Gavin was not a CEO. Gavin was a man who had cycled through 5 visionary startups in 6 years, each one funded by family guilt and ending in quiet disaster. I watched his mouth move. I could imagine the tone, the unearned confidence, the sheer, breathtaking entitlement of standing in a house he did not pay for, directing movers he likely had not tipped, to arrange furniture that did not fit. I reached for the door handle, ready to storm out and scream. Then I stopped. The training from North Pine Civic Studio kicked in. When a contractor pours concrete in the wrong place, you do not scream. Screaming does not remove concrete. You document. You check the blueprints. You build a paper trail so solid that when the lawyers get involved, the other side suffocates under the weight of indisputable fact. I took my hand off the door handle. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I unlocked the screen and opened the voice recorder app. I hit the red button. Then I opened the camera. I sat in my car and took a picture of the rental truck's license plate. I took a picture of the tire crushing my grass. I took a burst of photos showing the movers hauling boxes labeled Marissa Kitchen and Gavin Office up my driveway. I checked the time. It was 2:15 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I spoke quietly into the phone, narrating the scene for the future record. It is Tuesday, October 14th. I am at my property at 1210 Cedar Ridge Lane. Unknown individuals are moving personal property into the residence without my permission. I am witnessing Gavin Cross and hired laborers accessing the dwelling. I took a deep breath, smoothed the front of my blazer, and stepped out of the car. The air smelled of pine needles and diesel exhaust from the idling truck. I walked up the driveway, my heels clicking a sharp, rhythmic warning on the pavement. The movers ignored me, sweating under the weight of a heavy oak dresser that looked ridiculous against the sleek exterior of the house. I walked through the front door. The first thing that hit me was the smell. The house was supposed to smell like new construction, sawdust, adhesive, clean air. Instead, it smelled of grease. On the kitchen island, my kitchen island, a slab of quartz that had cost me $4,000, sat a spread of fast food. Greasy wrappers were torn open, exposing half-eaten burgers. A large cup of soda was sweating condensation onto the stone, leaving a ring. A pool of ketchup was dangerously close to the edge. Marissa was standing by the sink, unwrapping a set of tumblers. When she saw me, her face lit up. It was not a look of guilt. It was worse. It was a look of benevolent charity. She smiled the way one smiles at a slow child who has finally caught up to the group. "Brielle," she exclaimed, clapping her hands together. "Oh, you're early. We wanted to have everything set up before you got here." My niece and nephew, aged 6 and 8, came thundering down the hallway. They were shrieking with laughter, chasing each other with plastic swords. They were not being malicious. They were just being children. But their sneakers were leaving muddy streaks on the polished concrete floor I had specifically chosen for its pristine, industrial reflection. I did not look at the children. I looked at my sister. "Marissa," I said. My voice was level. The phone in my pocket was still recording. "What is this?" "Surprise!" She threw her arms out, gesturing to the chaos of boxes that blocked the hallway. I know. We didn't tell you. Mom said we should just do it and see your face. Do you love it? We got the movers for a steal because Gavin knew a guy." I felt a vain throb in my temple. "What are you doing in my house?" "Our house, Bree," she corrected gently, her voice taking on that soothing, maddening lilt she used when she wanted something. "I mean, look at this place. It is massive. 3,000 square feet? Maybe more?" 3,200, I said automatically. "Exactly," Marissa said, picking up a fry from the pile on the island and popping it into her mouth. "It is huge, and you are just you. One person. It is ridiculous for you to be rattling around in this big empty space all by yourself. It is not safe. And honestly, it is a little selfish, isn't it? Leaving all these bedrooms empty?" I stared at her. The logic was so twisted it was almost architectural. "So you decided to move in?" I asked. "We decided to make it logical," Marissa said, wiping salt from her fingers onto her jeans. "We gave up the lease on the apartment. The landlord was being a jerk anyway, and Mom agreed that this is the best solution for everyone. You get family around so you are not lonely, and we help you manage the place. It is a win-win." Before I could respond, a shadow fell over us. Gavin walked in from the patio. He looked like he had just surveyed a kingdom he had conquered. He walked right past me, picked up the soda cup from the counter, and took a loud, slurping sip. "Great light in here, Brielle," he said, nodding approvingly. "Really great light. The feng shui is decent, but we need to change the flow in the living room. I told the movers to put the entertainment center on the north wall. I need a specific backdrop for my video calls." He looked at me, waiting for a thank you. "You are moving in," I stated. It was not a question. We are upgrading, Gavin corrected, flashing a smile that showed too many teeth. My brand is pivoting. I am moving into high-end lifestyle consulting. I need an address that screams success. Clients need to see that I am living the life I am selling. The apartment? It was too small time. This place? He gestured vaguely at the ceiling. This place has the right energy. I can already see the content I am going to film in the backyard. He leaned against the counter, crossing his ankles. Look, Brielle, don't worry about the mortgage. You keep handling that. It is your investment. After all, we are just helping you utilize the asset. A house like this needs life in it. It needs energy. You are at work all the time anyway. We will be here to make sure the place doesn't feel like a museum. I looked from Gavin to Marissa. They had not just moved furniture, they had moved a narrative. In their minds, they were doing me a favor. They had rewritten reality so effectively that in this moment, I was the unreasonable one for standing in my own kitchen, wearing my coat, while they ate lunch on my counter. I looked at the ketchup stain on the quartz. I looked at the muddy footprints on the concrete. I looked at the hideous beige sofa that was now blocking the view of the valley I had paid $750,000 to see. I felt the phone warm against my leg. The recording was ticking past the 4-minute mark. Who told you the code to the front door? I asked. Marissa waved her hand dismissively. Oh, Mom had the spare key you gave her. She said you would want us to get a head start. Mom gave you the key, I repeated. She insisted, Marissa said. She is so happy. Bree, she was crying on the phone earlier. She said, finally, Brielle is doing something for the family. Don't ruin this for her, okay? She has had a hard year with her blood pressure. The trap was perfect. If I screamed, I was the hysterical spinster sister. If I kicked them out, I was the heartless daughter giving her mother a stroke. If I accepted it, I was the doormat I had been for 34 years. But they had made one miscalculation. They thought they were dealing with Brielle the daughter, the one who sighed and fixed things and wrote checks to keep the peace. They did not realize they were standing in the domain of Brielle Hartman, the project manager, and in my line of work, unauthorized excavation is not a family matter. It is a violation of contract. I did not take off my coat. I did not put down my purse. I see, I said. My voice was frighteningly calm. So, the apartment is gone? Keys turned in this morning, Gavin said, crunching on an ice cube. No looking back. Forward momentum only. And the kids' school? I asked. Transferred, Marissa said, beaming. The district here is rated 10 out of 10. The paperwork is already pending. We used this address. Mom said it would be fine. They had burned the bridge behind them. They had nowhere to go. They had engineered a situation where I had to absorb them or leave them homeless. It was a hostage situation, and my house was the cell. I looked at Gavin, who was now typing on his phone, likely updating his status to announce his new acquisition. I looked at Marissa, who was humming as she unpacked a box of chipped mugs. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply took my phone out of my pocket, stopped the recording, and saved the file under the name Incident 1. I am going to the bathroom, I said. Sure, Gavin said, not looking up. Master bath is huge. By the way, I might claim that shower. Good water pressure. I turned and walked down the hallway. I did not go to the bathroom. I walked into the guest bedroom, the one intended for my office, and closed the door. I locked it. I leaned against the heavy wood, listening to the muffled sounds of my life being invaded. I could hear the movers grunting as they lifted something heavy. I could hear Gavin laughing. I looked at the timestamp on my phone, 2:25. I had evidence of entry. I had their admission that they had no lease, no ownership, and no intention of paying. I had their admission that my mother had facilitated the breach. I opened my contacts and scrolled past Mom. I scrolled past Marissa. I stopped at a name I had added to my phone 2 weeks ago, on the advice of a colleague who had gone through a messy divorce. I tapped the message icon. I did not send a text. I opened the camera roll and selected the photo of the license plate, the photo of the damage to the grass, and the audio file I had just recorded. Then, I dialed the number for the non-emergency police line. I was not going to play a family drama. I was going to play a property dispute. And I was going to win. I stepped out of the guest room, and the hallway felt smaller than it had 5 minutes ago. The air was thick with the scent of unwashed moving blankets and the spicy, artificial aroma of the fast food cooling on the counter. 2 men were wrestling a scratched wooden wardrobe through the front door, the corner of it perilously close to the matte black sconce I had selected from a catalog in Milan. "Stop," I said. My voice was not loud, but it projected with the flat, hard resonance of a site manager shutting down an unsafe excavation. The movers hesitated. The shorter one looked at me, then at Gavin. The heavy wardrobe hovered in the air, a physical manifestation of the standoff. "Keep going. Guys," Gavin said, not even looking up from his tablet. He was tapping furiously, likely drafting a LinkedIn post about his new headquarters. "Just pivoted around the newel post. We need to get the master suite set up before the sun goes down. The golden hour light is crucial for the vlog intro." I said stop, I repeated, walking forward until I stood directly in the path of the men. "If you take one more step into this house, I will sue your company for trespassing and property damage. Put the furniture down, outside." The movers looked at Gavin again, their expressions shifting from annoyance to confusion. They were paid by the hour, but they evidently did not get paid enough for domestic warfare. Slowly, they lowered the wardrobe onto the entryway floor. It landed with a heavy thud that vibrated through the soles of my shoes. Gavin sighed, a theatrical exhalation that suggested he was dealing with a particularly slow intern. He slid his tablet into his blazer pocket and turned to me, offering a pitying smile. Brielle, he said, shaking his head. "You are being dramatic. It is just furniture. It is just things. Why are you so attached to the idea of empty space? It is pathological, really." "Who let you in?" I asked. I wanted him to say it again, clearly for the record. "We are family," Gavin replied, spreading his hands as if that single word explained the invasion. "You pay the mortgage, sure, we appreciate that, truly, but we are here to help you utilize the asset. A house like this? It is a waste for one person. It is an inefficiency. I am fixing the inefficiency. We are bringing value to the property. My brand presence alone is going to increase the neighborhood comps." "I did not ask for your brand," I said. "I did not ask for your value. I asked for a home that was mine. Get your things out." Marissa appeared from the hallway leading to the bedrooms. She was holding a stack of my towels, the Egyptian cotton ones I had not even washed yet. She clutched them to her chest like a shield. "Brielle, please," she said, her voice dropping into that wheedling, sugary register she used whenever she needed a loan. "Don't make a scene in front of the movers. It is embarrassing. We are already here. The truck is half empty. The beds are already set up in the kids' rooms." "Take them down," I said. "We can't," Marissa said, her eyes widening with feigned helplessness. "We literally can't. We gave up the apartment key at noon. We have nowhere else to go tonight. And besides, I already submitted the transfer paperwork for the school district. The registrar called me back 10 minutes ago. It is done. Brielle, the kids are enrolled here starting Monday. You wouldn't want to traumatize them by pulling the rug out now, would you?" There it was, the anchor. They had moved with lightning speed to entangle their lives with the address before I even knew they were packing. They had weaponized the school system and their own homelessness to force my compliance. I pulled my phone out again. I did not look at Marissa. I dialed the one number that I knew was the architect of this disaster. It rang 3 times before my mother picked up. "Hello, darling," Evelyn's voice chirped through the speaker. I had put it on speakerphone immediately, holding the device up like a piece of evidence. "Did they arrive? Is the house just magnificent?" I told Marissa to put the big armchair near the fireplace. It adds such a cozy touch. "Mom," I said, cutting through her performance, "why did you give Gavin a key to my house?" "Oh, Brielle, don't use that tone," Evelyn scolded, the cheerfulness vanishing instantly, replaced by the sharp edge of maternal disappointment. I didn't give him a key. I gave a key to your family. There is a difference. I am the owner of this house, I said. I am the only name on the deed. I explicitly told you that I bought this place because I needed my own space. You stole my spare key and gave it to them without my permission. Permissions? Evelyn scoffed. Since when do we need permission to love each other? You are 34 years old. Brielle, you are single. You are alone. What were you going to do in 4 bedrooms? Echo? It is selfish. That is what it is. It is deeply, profoundly selfish to hoard all that space when your sister is struggling in that cramped apartment. I worked for this, I said, my voice trembling with the effort to remain professional. I worked 80-hour weeks for 7 years. I saved every dollar. I did not ask for help. I did not ask for a handout. And who raised you to be able to work like that? Evelyn countered. Her logic was a suffocating loop. We sacrificed everything for you, your father and I. We gave you the foundation, and now that you have made it, you think you can just shut the door on us? On your sister? Marissa needs this stability. Gavin is on the verge of a breakthrough. They just need a runway. I looked at Gavin. He was leaning against the wall, smirking as he listened to his mother-in-law do his fighting for him. A breakthrough? I said, letting my gaze drill into him. Like the artisanal water bottling company in 2018? The one where he spent $15,000 of Dad's retirement money on glass bottles that shattered in the frost because he didn't rent a climate-controlled warehouse? Gavin's smirk faltered. He pushed off the wall. That was a supply chain issue, he snapped. You don't understand logistics. Or maybe like the crypto mining rig he set up in your basement in 2020? I continued, speaking to the phone but staring at him. The one that blew out your circuit breaker and cost you $6,000 in electrical repairs? Or the lifestyle coaching app that never actually launched because he spent the seed money on a lease for a sports car? That is enough, Brielle, Evelyn shouted through the phone. Stop keeping score. That is your problem. You always keep score. You are cold. You care more about your bank account than your own blood. I care about not being exploited, I said. Gavin has burned through every safety net this family has. He has drained you. He has drained Dad. And now that you are tapped out, you are trying to attach him to me like a leech because I am the only host left with any blood. He is trying to build a legacy, Evelyn cried. The market has been hard. He is a visionary. Brielle, you are a worker. You follow rules. He sees potential. You should be honored to support him while he builds something great for all of us. I am not a venture capital fund, I said. I am your daughter, and you set me up. You waited until I signed the papers, and then you invaded. We are doing what is best for the family unit, Evelyn said, her voice turning icy. If you kick them out, Brielle, if you put your sister and those grandbabies on the street, do not bother coming to Christmas. Do not bother calling me on Sunday. You will be dead to us. Do you hear me? You will be the one who broke this family, not us. Mom. The line went dead. She had hung up. She had fired the ultimate weapon, compliance or exile. I lowered the phone. The silence in the entryway was heavy. The movers were watching me with wide eyes. Marissa was inspecting her fingernails, looking bored, as if she knew exactly how that conversation would go. Gavin stepped forward. He adjusted his lapels, regaining his composure now that the authority figure had validated him. See, he said smoothly. Even Evelyn agrees. You are overreacting. It is the stress of the move, low blood sugar, probably. He gestured to the movers. Go ahead. Guys, take the wardrobe to the master bedroom, the one with the balcony. Yeah, Marissa added, looking up. And be careful with the walls. Brielle is very particular about scuff marks. They were doing it. They were ignoring the explosion that had just happened. They were glossing over the screaming match, the insults, the history of financial ruin. They were betting on the fact that I was too polite, too trained in the art of being the good daughter to physically bar the way. They were creating a reality where they lived here, and I was just the roommate with an attitude problem. I looked at the wardrobe. I looked at the boxes stacked in the hallway, labeled with their names. I looked at the school transfer papers sticking out of Marissa's purse on the counter. They had not just moved in furniture, they had moved in a legal nightmare. If they stayed the night, if they received mail here, if they could prove they had nowhere else to go. They would establish tenancy. In this state, once someone established residency, you could not just kick them out, you had to evict them, and eviction took months. Months of Gavin in my house, months of paying for their electricity, their water, their food, months of them eroding my sanity until I eventually just moved into the guest room and let them take over, exactly as Evelyn intended. They thought the conversation was over because Evelyn had hung up. They thought the hierarchy had been re-established. Gavin the visionary, Marissa the mother, Evelyn the matriarch, and Brielle the bank. I looked at Gavin, who was now instructing the movers on how to angle the furniture to maximize flow. I am not the bank, I whispered to myself. I turned my back on them and walked toward the kitchen island. I did not scream. I did not throw the fast food on the floor, much as I wanted to. I picked up my purse. "Where are you going?" Marissa called out, sounding hopeful. "Grocery run? We need milk, and maybe some wine, to celebrate." "No," I said, without turning around. "I am just making sure I have everything I need." I checked my folder, the deed, the closing statement, the affidavit of occupancy I had signed 3 days ago stating I was the sole resident. They wanted to play house. They wanted to play family. I was done playing. I walked back to the front door, past the movers who were heaving the wardrobe up again. I stepped out onto the porch, into the cooling afternoon air. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows across the driveway where the rental truck still sat, leaking oil onto my pavement. I stood there for a moment, listening to Gavin's voice drift out through the open door. "Careful with that, that is vintage." It was not vintage. It was a mass-produced particle board cabinet from a discount store in 2015. But to Gavin, everything he touched was gold, and everything I owned was public property. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of cedar and impending war. I had given them a chance to leave. I had given them a chance to respect me. They had chosen to double down. I unlocked my phone screen. The call log showed the failed negotiation with Evelyn. It was time for the call I had prepared for, the one I had hoped I wouldn't have to make, but knew deep down was inevitable. I looked at the house one more time, my house, filled with their noise. Then, I turned my back on the front door and walked down the driveway to where the cell reception was strongest. I was not going to run away. I was just clearing the blast zone. The wind on the bluff was picking up, cutting through my coat, but I did not zip it up. I needed the cold. I needed the sharp, physical bite of the temperature to remind me that I was standing in the real world, not the delusional fantasy land my family had constructed inside my living room. I looked down at my feet. Today, I was wearing Italian leather heels, bought specifically for the closing ceremony of the house, but as I stared at the asphalt of the driveway, I did not see the heels. I saw the steel-toed boots I had worn for the last 2,555 days. My family liked to tell people that I worked in design. It sounded elegant. It sounded like I sat in a climate-controlled office sketching flowers and fountains while sipping espresso. They did not know about the mud. They did not know about the job sites in November, when the freezing rain turned the excavation pits into slurry that sucked the boots right off your feet. They did not know about the porta-potties that hadn't been cleaned in a week, or the way the older male contractors would look right through me, talking to my male intern instead because they couldn't fathom that the woman standing there was the one signing their pay applications. I had eaten lunch in my car, staring at blueprints, more times than I had eaten at a table. I had missed birthdays. I had missed weddings. I had worked through the flu, through migraines, through exhaustion so deep it felt like my bones were made of lead. I did this because I had a number in my head. That number was the price of freedom. For a decade, I had lived like a monk in a studio apartment the size of a parking space. My furniture was secondhand. My clothes were functional. I drove a sedan with 150,000 miles on the odometer and a rattle in the exhaust system that I ignored, because fixing it meant taking money out of the Freedom Fund. I did not go to Cabo for bachelorette parties. I did not buy the newest phone. I did not treat myself to brunch. Every dollar I earned was a brick in a wall I was building to keep the chaos out, because chaos was the only inheritance my parents had to give. I closed my eyes and the memory of the phone calls washed over me. It was always the same script. It usually happened on a Tuesday night or a Thursday, right after I had finally taken my boots off and collapsed onto my cheap sofa. The phone would ring. It would be Evelyn. She never asked for money immediately. That was too crude for her. She would start with affection. She would ask about my day, listening to exactly 3 sentences before sighing loudly, a sound engineered to elicit concern. Then came the pivot. "Gavin is just so stressed," she would say, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "This new venture is brilliant, Brielle, truly brilliant, but the investors are dragging their feet on the wire transfer. He just needs to cover payroll for 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks. It is a bridge loan. He will pay you back with interest." I remembered the first time. I was 25. I gave them $2,000. I felt proud to be the one who could help. I remembered the 5th time. I was 27. It was $5,000 for a marketing push that turned out to be a lease on a luxury SUV, because Gavin said he needed to project success to attract success. I remembered the time I said no. I was 30. I had just finished a grueling project downtown. I was tired. Gavin had accidentally used the company credit card for a family vacation to Disney World and was facing legal action if he didn't pay it back within 48 hours. Evelyn had called, sobbing. She didn't ask. She demanded. She said it was for the grandchildren. She said I was the only one who could save them from ruin. When I refused, the warmth vanished. The "my darling daughter" became, "You have changed." They told me I was cold. They told me I had lost my soul to the corporate world. They told me I loved my bank account more than I loved my own flesh and blood. I eventually paid. I always paid. I paid to make the phone stop ringing. I paid to buy silence. I paid because deep down, a small, pathetic part of me hoped that if I wrote a big enough check, they would finally look at me with the same adoration they gave to Gavin when he walked in the room with nothing but a smile and a lie. But the checks never bought respect. They only bought more requests. That was why I bought the house at Cedar Ridge Bluffs. It was not about the view. It was not about the square footage. It was about the locks. I wanted a door that opened only for me. I wanted a refrigerator where the food I bought was still there in the morning. I wanted a silence that wasn't pregnant with the anticipation of the next crisis. I wanted to wake up on a Saturday morning and know, with absolute certainty, that no one was going to ask me for anything. This house was supposed to be the physical manifestation of my boundaries. It was supposed to be the one place on earth where I was not a resource to be mined, but a human being to be at rest. I opened my eyes and looked back at the house. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass, I could see my nephew running in circles around the kitchen island. He was wearing his muddy sneakers. I watched as he stomped on the pristine, polished concrete, leaving a trail of brown, wet earth with every step. He was a child. He didn't know better. I didn't blame him. I blamed the adults who were watching him and saying nothing. Marissa was pouring wine into a glass. My wine, opened with my corkscrew. Gavin was pacing the living room, talking on the phone, gesturing at the walls as if he were redesigning them. They were not treating this house like a sanctuary. They were treating it like a hotel they had booked with a stolen credit card. The mud on the floor was not just dirt. It was a symbol. It was proof that no matter how hard I worked, no matter how far I ran, no matter how many walls I built, they would always feel entitled to climb over them and wipe their feet on my achievements. They thought this was a negotiation. They thought that if they just stayed long enough, if they unpacked enough boxes, if they made me feel enough guilt, I would revert to the default setting. I would sigh, I would complain, and then I would go to the guest room. I would pay the mortgage, I would pay the utilities, I would let them eat my food and spend my money. and I would tell myself that this was just what families did. I looked at the mud again. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, metallic click of a lock engaging. For 34 years, I had played by the rules of the family contract. The family contract said that love was transactional. It said that the capable must carry the reckless. It said that saying no was an act of aggression. But standing there in the cold driveway, I realized that the family contract was void. They had breached it the moment they stole my key. I was not going to go back inside and scream. Screaming was part of their game. Screaming meant emotion, and emotion could be manipulated. Evelyn was a master of emotional judo. She could turn my anger into my shame in less than 60 seconds. No, I was not going to play their game anymore. I reached into my bag and touched the cool, stiff paper of the legal file I had prepared. I had felt paranoid when I met with a real estate attorney last week. I had felt like a traitor when I asked him to draft the affidavit of sole occupancy. I had almost thrown it away this morning, thinking I was being too cynical. I wasn't being cynical. I was being predictive. I was done being the daughter. I was done being the sister. Those roles were compromised. From this moment forward, I was the owner. Gavin and Marissa were not family members in need. They were unauthorized occupants. They were liabilities. And in my line of work, when you found a liability on the site, you didn't hug it. You didn't argue with it. You removed it. I watched Gavin laugh at something on the phone, throwing his head back, completely at ease in a house he hadn't paid a dime for. He looked so confident. He thought he had won because he was inside and I was outside. He didn't realize that I wasn't staying outside. I was just changing the rules of engagement. I turned away from the window. The wind was biting harder now, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt a strange, terrifying clarity. I tapped the screen of my phone. I had the police non-emergency line pre-programmed. I had my lawyer, Caleb, on speed dial. I was about to burn the bridge. I knew that. I knew that once I made this next move, there would be no Sunday dinners. There would be no Christmas cards. I would be the villain in the family story for the next 50 years. I looked at the mud on the floor one last time. It was worth it. I lifted the phone to my ear. My hand was steady. My voice, when I prepared to speak, would not be the voice of Brielle the doormat. It would be the voice of the person who signed the checks. It was time to evict the past, the key. It all circled back to the innocent. Silver piece of metal I had handed to my mother 3 weeks ago. I stood at the bottom of the driveway, the cold wind biting at my cheeks, and allowed myself a moment of grim satisfaction. They thought I was naive. They thought I had handed over that key because I was the dutiful daughter who believed her mother just wanted to water the plants and dust the shelves before moving day. But I knew my mother, Evelyn Hartman, had never held a watering can in her life. She regarded manual labor as a personal insult. When she had asked for the spare key, her eyes had shifted to the left, a tell she had possessed since I was a child. She had said she wanted to make sure the place was welcoming for me. In the language of my family, welcoming meant colonized. The alarm bells had not just rung in my head, they had screamed. I had handed her the key with a smile, but the moment her car pulled away, I had driven in the opposite direction. I did not drive to work. I drove to the law offices of Rourke and Associates. I opened my leather tote bag and looked down at the crisp white envelope nestled against my laptop. I had paid Caleb Rourke $400 an hour to prepare for this exact moment. I remembered sitting in his office, surrounded by mahogany bookshelves, explaining that I needed a nuclear option. Caleb had looked at me over the rim of his glasses. Skeptical at first, he asked why I was preparing eviction documents for a house I had not even moved into yet. I had told him simply, "You do not know my family." Inside that envelope was a dossier of absolute ownership. It contained the deed, notarized and stamped, listing Brielle Hartman as the sole owner. There was no and, no trust, no beneficiary, just me. Behind the deed was a terrifyingly specific document, an affidavit of non-residency. It stated clearly that no individuals other than myself had permission to reside, store property, or access the premises at 1210 Cedar Ridge Lane. And behind that were the trespass notices. Caleb had pre-filled them. All they lacked were the names of the offenders and the date. I pulled a pen from my bag, resting the envelope against the hood of my car. I uncapped the pen. My hand was steady as I wrote Gavin Cross on the first line, then Marissa Cross on the second. I dated it, October 14th. I capped the pen. The trap was set. But for the trap to be airtight, I needed one final component. I needed them to verbally confirm their intent to squat. I needed them to admit, on the recording that was still running on my phone, that they had no lease and no ability to pay. I took a deep breath, smoothing my features into a mask of resigned defeat. I needed to look like I was wavering. I needed to look like the Brielle they could bully. I walked back up the driveway. When I re-entered the house, the atmosphere had shifted. The tension had dissipated, replaced by a smug sense of victory. They assumed my walk outside was just me cooling off, accepting my fate. Marissa was in the kitchen, arranging cereal boxes in my pantry. She had moved my organic quinoa to a high shelf to make room for sugary loops and chocolate puffs. "Oh, good. You are back," she said, not turning around. "Gavin is trying to figure out the smart thermostat. Do you have the Wi-Fi password? He needs to sync his devices." I ignored the request. I walked into the living room. Gavin was standing in the center of the space, hands on his hips, staring at the fireplace. He had already moved a hideous faux fur rug in front of the hearth. "The acoustics in here are actually decent," he said as I approached. "I was thinking, Brielle, if we turn the den into a studio, we can write it off as a home office. I can help you with the tax deductions. You probably miss a lot of loopholes doing it by the book." I stopped 10 feet away from him. I made sure my phone was positioned in my pocket, so the microphone had a clear path. "Gavin," I said, keeping my voice low and trembling slightly, feigning anxiety, "I am worried about the cost. This house has a mortgage of $4,000 a month. The utilities are going to be another $500. The taxes are significant." Gavin waved a hand dismissively. "Money is just energy. Bree, you worry too much about the outflow and not enough about the inflow. That is your scarcity mindset talking." "But who is paying?" I asked. I needed him to say it. "I cannot support 2 households. If you live here, do you have a lease? Are you paying rent?" Gavin chuckled, a sound that grated against my nerves like sandpaper. He walked over and placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. I had to fight the urge to recoil. "A lease?" he asked, as if I had suggested we speak in Latin. "We are family. You don't sign leases with family. That is so transactional. Look, here is the plan. You keep covering the mortgage for now. You are the one with the steady paycheck, right? It is easy for you. And me? I am about to close a massive deal with a partner in Austin. Massive. Once that liquidity hits, I will take care of the maintenance." "Maintenance?" I repeated. "Yeah, lawn care, pool cleaning. Maybe I will throw in for the internet if I am using a lot of bandwidth." He squeezed my shoulder. You just let us stay here. Let us get our feet under us. And when I succeed, and I will succeed, I will pay you back for the little stuff. Think of it as an investment in the family brand." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "So, to be clear," I said slowly, "you are not paying rent, you are not on the title, and you intend to stay here indefinitely until this deal closes?" "Exactly," Gavin beamed, thinking he had won me over. "We are in this together, indefinitely. That is a good word. We are planting roots." "And Mom knows this?" I asked. "Evelyn orchestrated it," Marissa chimed in from the kitchen, walking in with a half-eaten apple. "She said you needed a push to open your heart. She said you would thank us later when the house is full of life instead of just you." I had it. I had the admission of zero financial contribution. I had the admission of indefinite intent. I had the admission that their presence was a coordinated scheme by my mother, not a misunderstanding. I stepped back, moving out from under Gavin's hand. "Okay," I said softly. "Okay?" Gavin smiled. "Great. Now, about that Wi-Fi password. I really need to upload a story. 1 second, I said. I just need to check something. I turned away and pulled my phone out. I stopped the recording. I saved it as confession of intent. Then, I opened my text messages. I found the number for Sarah, the real estate broker who had handled the sale. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had warned me during the closing that the neighborhood had strict HOA rules. I typed quickly, "Sarah, urgent verification needed. Please confirm via text that I'm the sole individual on the deed for 1210 Cedar Ridge. Confirm there are no co-signers and no authorized tenants listed on any closing docs." I watched the 3 little dots appear almost instantly. Sarah was efficient. Her reply came in 10 seconds later. "Confirmed. Brielle, you are the sole owner in fee simple. No co-borrowers, no other names on the title, no rental addendums filed. Why? Is everything okay?" I did not reply to her question. I just screenshotted the text. I looked at the time on my phone. It was now 3:10 in the afternoon. Every minute that ticked by was dangerous. In legal terms, there was a gray area between a guest and a resident. If they slept here, if they received mail, if they moved enough furniture in that, it looked like a permanent dwelling. The police might shrug and call it a civil matter. They would tell me to go to court. And court took months. I could not let the sun go down. I could not let them sleep in those beds. I looked at Gavin, who was now instructing the movers to be careful with his collection of vintage vinyl records. He looked so comfortable. He looked like he owned the place. He had no idea that he was standing on a trapdoor. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't fear anymore. It was adrenaline. It was the same feeling I got right before a massive demolition project began, the split second before the wrecking ball swung. I zipped up my bag. I could feel the sharp corner of the white envelope pressing against my side. "Gavin," I said. My voice was different now. The tremble was gone. It was the voice I used when I told a contractor that his concrete pour was rejected. He turned, holding a copy of a Beatles album. "Yeah? Password?" "No," I said. "No password." I walked over to the kitchen island. I cleared a space, pushing aside a greasy burger wrapper. I laid the white envelope on the quartz surface. It looked stark and bright against the dark stone. "What is that?" Marissa asked, chewing on her apple. "That," I said, "is the reality of the situation." I didn't wait for them to ask more. I didn't wait for them to open it. The time for discussion was over. The time for execution had begun. I tapped the screen of my phone one last time, initiating the call I had hoped I wouldn't have to make, but was entirely ready to see through. "Who are you calling?" Gavin asked, his brow furrowing as he sensed the shift in the air. I held his gaze, my eyes cold and steady. "I am calling the people who actually enforce the law," I said, "because the family rules do not apply here anymore." The phone felt cold and hard against my ear. A solid anchor in a room that was rapidly filling with the hot, suffocating air of my family's entitlement. I turned my back to the kitchen, facing the expanse of the glass wall that looked out over the driveway. I needed to see the road. I needed to see the physical approach of the consequence I was about to summon. "Cedar Ridge Police, non-emergency dispatch," a woman's voice said. Her tone was flat, bored, and professional. It was the most beautiful sound I had heard all day. "This is Brielle Hartman," I said. I kept my voice low, precise, and devoid of tremor. I was not a daughter complaining about her sister. I was a property owner reporting a violation. "I am the sole owner of the property at 1210 Cedar Ridge Lane. I have intruders on my premises who are refusing to vacate the property." "Are the individuals known to you?" the dispatcher asked. "They are relatives," I said, cutting off the natural inclination to soften the blow. "However, they do not have residency. They do not have a lease, and they have been explicitly asked to leave. They are now attempting to move furniture into the dwelling against my direct instruction. I am requesting an officer to assist in removing them for criminal trespass." There was a pause on the line. I could hear the click of a keyboard. "We have a unit in the vicinity," the dispatcher said. "They are responding to a noise complaint 2 streets over. I will redirect them." Are there any weapons? No weapons, I said. Just verbal hostility. An officer will be there in approximately 10 minutes, she said. I ended the call. I did not put the phone away. I immediately dialed the second number. This one rang only once. Caleb Rourke, the voice answered. It was sharp, alert. It is Brielle, I said. Execute the file. They are actually refusing? Caleb asked. He sounded almost impressed by their audacity. I have the cease and desist and the notice of trespass ready to go. I am emailing a digital copy to the local precinct commander right now to ensure the responding officers have the property records on their dashboard computers. Do you have the physical copies? On the counter, I said. Good, Caleb said. Do not engage. Do not argue. Let the paper do the talking. If the officers hesitate, put me on speaker. I will explain the statute to them. I hung up. The entire process had taken less than 2 minutes. In those 2 minutes, I had dismantled the invisible hierarchy of my family and replaced it with the rigid, unyielding framework of the law. When I turned back to the room, Marissa was smiling. She was leaning against the island, holding a slice of pizza she had retrieved from one of the greasy boxes. She looked at me with a mixture of amusement and pity, completely misinterpreting the serious expression on my face. Who was that? She asked, taking a bite. Please tell me you called an Italian place. This pizza is cold. And honestly, if we are going to celebrate, we need something better than fast food. Did you order catering? A little housewarming spread? She laughed, a light, bubbling sound that grated against my nerves. That is so you, Brielle. You act all stiff and angry, but then you go and order food. You just want to be the hero, don't you? You want us to thank you. Gavin looked up from his stack of vinyl records. If you ordered food, make sure they have gluten-free options. My gut health is a priority right now. The disconnect was staggering. They were so deeply entrenched in their own narrative. The narrative where Brielle always fixes it, where Brielle always pays, where Brielle's anger is just a performance before the inevitable submission, that they literally could not hear the danger. I did not answer them. I walked over to the kitchen island. I reached into my bag and pulled out the thick, white envelope. The logo of Rourke and Associates. Attorneys at Law was embossed in navy blue ink on the corner. It looked stark and clinical against the gray quartz. I placed it on the counter. I did not toss it. I placed it with the deliberate care of a poker player revealing a royal flush. The sound of the heavy paper hitting the stone was a soft slap that cut through the ambient noise of the room. What is this? Gavin asked, squinting at the logo. Attorneys? Did you bring work home? Bree, you need to learn to disconnect. Work-life balance is crucial. It is not work, I said. It is for you. Marissa frowned, reaching for the envelope. For us? What, did you write us a check? You didn't have to put it in a legal envelope. That is so weird. Before her fingers could touch the paper, a flash of blue light swept across the living room wall. It was faint at first, a rhythmic pulse of azure cutting through the afternoon sun. Then it grew brighter, intense, rotating. The sound of tires crushing gravel on the driveway was audible through the open front door. It was heavy, authoritative. The engine cut, but the lights kept spinning, casting long, frantic shadows that danced across the high ceilings of my living room. Gavin froze. He was holding a Beatles album in midair. His head snapped toward the window. Is that the cops? He asked. His voice cracked. The smooth, confident baritone of the visionary CEO vanished, replaced by the shrill tone of a man who had outstanding parking tickets and a history of dodging creditors. He ran to the window, pressing his face against the glass. Why are the cops here? Did someone report the moving truck? I told those guys not to park on the street. He turned to the movers, who had stopped halfway up the stairs with a box of books. Did you guys hit something? Did you hit a mailbox? The movers shook their heads, their eyes wide. They set the box down and backed away, instinctively distancing themselves from whatever was about to happen. Marissa dropped the slice of pizza. It landed face down on the counter, smearing tomato sauce on the pristine surface. She looked at the blue lights, then at me. The realization hit her slowly. It wasn't understanding. It was a mutation of her existing delusion. "Brielle," she whispered, her eyes filling with instant, weaponized tears. "What did you do? You didn't call them on us, did you?" I stood perfectly still. My hands were clasped in front of me. "I called the police to report a trespassing." "Trespassing?" Marissa shrieked. The sound was so sharp it made the movers wince. "We are your family. You are insane. Gavin, look at her. She is having a breakdown." She rushed to Gavin, grabbing his arm. "She is unstable. I told you she has been working too hard. She is snapping. Who calls the police on their own sister?" Gavin looked at the police cruiser parked behind the moving truck. 2 officers were stepping out. They were adjusting their belts, putting on their hats. They looked calm. They looked like people who had a job to do. Gavin's face went pale, but then, just as quickly, a flush of red anger crept up his neck. He tried to straighten his blazer. He tried to summon the ghost of his bravado. Okay, Gavin stammered. "This is ridiculous. It is a misunderstanding. I handle these things. I deal with compliance issues all the time. I will just talk to them, man to man, explain the situation." He walked toward the door, but he didn't look like a man in charge. He looked like a man trying to convince himself he wasn't drowning. "Don't you dare open that door!" Marissa yelled at me, though I hadn't moved. "Brielle, tell them to leave. Tell them it was a mistake. Think about the neighbors. Think about Mom. If the neighbors see police cars here on day 1, we will be the laughingstock of the community." "I am not the one who will be embarrassed," I said. "You are sick," Marissa hissed. She grabbed the edge of the counter, her knuckles turning white. "You are jealous. That is what this is. You see us happy. You see us with a family. And you can't stand it in your big, empty, lonely house. So you try to humiliate us?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. For years. Her tantrums had terrified me. They had been the weather events that dictated the climate of our family. If Marissa stormed, we all sought shelter. If Marissa cried, we all apologized. But today, watching her frantic, venomous performance against the backdrop of the silent, flashing blue lights, she didn't look scary. She looked small. She looked like a tenant who had forgotten that she didn't own the building. The heavy footsteps crunching on the front walkway grew louder. Clump, clump, clump. The shadow of 2 uniformed officers fell across the threshold. Gavin stopped in the middle of the hallway. He spread his arms in a welcoming gesture that looked more like a surrender. "Officers! Gentlemen! Good afternoon. Just a little family dispute here. Nothing to worry about. We are just moving in. Tensions are high. You know how it is with the in-laws." The lead officer did not smile. He was a tall man with a graying crew cut and eyes that had seen 1,000 Gavins. He did not step inside. He stood on the porch, respecting the threshold. He looked at Gavin. Then he looked past him, scanning the room until his eyes landed on me. Then he knocked on the open door frame. 3 hard, sharp raps. "We received a call regarding a criminal trespass at this address," the officer said. His voice was deep and carried easily through the high-ceilinged space. "I am looking for the homeowner. Who is the legal owner of this property?" Gavin opened his mouth to speak. "Well, technically, it is a family trust situation." "I am," I said. My voice cut through Gavin's babble like a scalpel. I stepped forward. I did not run. I walked with the rhythmic, measured pace of a project manager walking a site inspection. I picked up the white envelope from the counter. Marissa lunged for my arm. "Brielle, please, don't do this." I sidestepped her easily. I walked past Gavin, who was now sweating visibly. I walked right up to the doorway, stopping 2 feet from the officer. "I am Brielle Hartman," I said clearly. "I am the sole owner of this property." I handed him the envelope. "Here is the deed," I continued, reciting the list I had memorized. "Here is the proof of purchase. Here is the affidavit of sole occupancy, and here is the trespass notice I wish to have served." The officer took the envelope. He opened it. He looked at the first document, then the second. He nodded slowly. "Ma'am," the officer said, looking up from the papers, "you want these individuals removed?" "Yes," I said, "immediately." Behind me, the silence was absolute. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the distant, rhythmic clicking of the blue lights reflecting off the walls of the house that was finally, truly, beginning to fight back. The officer took the envelope from my hand, but before he could look down, Gavin made his move. It was a move born of desperation and a lifetime of failing upwards. He stepped around me, thrusting his hand toward the policeman's chest, forcing a handshake that the officer did not want. "Officer, hi," Gavin said, his voice booming with a manufactured joviality that echoed awkwardly off the high ceilings. "Gavin Cross. I am the head of the household here. I apologize for the confusion. My sister-in-law is going through a bit of a personal crisis, and she is acting out. We were just about to sit down and de-escalate, so if you want to head out, we can handle the domestic side of things." He smiled, that practiced, white-toothed smile he used on investors right before their checks bounced. He tried to physically position himself between the officer and me, using his body to block my access to authority. He was trying to establish a men talking while the women are hysterical dynamic. The officer did not shake his hand. He did not smile back. He looked at Gavin's outstretched hand for a long, uncomfortable second, then looked Gavin directly in the eye. "Step back." "Sir," the officer said. It was not a request. It was a command delivered with the flat, bored tone of a man who had heard every lie in the book before lunch. Gavin blinked, his smile faltering. "Excuse me? I am just trying to explain." "I said step back," the officer repeated, his hand resting near his belt. He turned his attention fully to me. "You are Ms. Hartman?" "I am Brielle Hartman," I said, stepping past Gavin as if he were merely a piece of furniture that had been placed in the wrong spot. "I am the sole owner of this property. The individuals you see here are Gavin Cross and Marissa Cross. They are not tenants. They have no lease. They have never paid rent. They entered the premises using a key that was stolen from my possession by a third party." I pointed to the papers in his hand. "That is the deed recorded with the county. That is the proof of purchase wire transfer from my personal account. And that is a signed affidavit stating that no other persons have residency rights at 1210 Cedar Ridge Lane." The officer opened the folder. The room went silent. The only sound was the rustling of paper as he flipped through the documents. He read slowly. He checked the seal on the deed. He checked the dates. He compared the name on the documents to the name on the driver's license I held out to him. Marissa couldn't take the silence. The pressure of the reality I had constructed was too much for her. "This is ridiculous," she screamed, stomping her foot on my polished concrete floor. "We have a key. My mother gave it to us. You can't treat us like criminals when we have a key to the front door." The officer looked up from the papers. He looked at Marissa with an expression of mild exhaustion. "Ma'am," he said, "possession of a key is not possession of the property. If I give my neighbor a key to feed my cat, and he moves his entire family into my living room, that is still trespassing. Do you have a lease?" "We are family," Marissa wailed, gesturing at the children who were now peeking out from behind the kitchen island, looking terrified. "We don't need a lease. We have an understanding." "I see no understanding here," the officer said, tapping the affidavit. "I see a legal document signed by the owner stating you are not welcome, and in the state of California, the owner's rights supersede an unauthorized guest's comfort." He turned to Gavin. "Sir, are you on the deed?" "Well, not on paper," Gavin stammered, his face turning a blotchy red. "But the intent, the family capital." "Yes or no?" The officer cut him off. "Is your name on the deed?" "No," Gavin whispered. "Then you are a guest," the officer said. He closed the folder and handed it back to me. Then he hooked his thumbs into his tactical vest and squared his shoulders. "And the host has asked you to leave. You have two choices right now. You can instruct your movers to reverse course and take your property off these premises immediately, or I can arrest you for criminal trespassing. If I arrest you, you will leave in the back of my car, and your property will be impounded." Gavin looked at the officer, then at me. He opened his mouth to argue, to spin another web of corporate buzzwords, but the reality of the badge and the gun and the cold, hard law silenced him. He turned to the movers. The two men had been standing by the stairs, holding a heavy box of books. They had been watching the exchange with wide eyes. "Hey!" Gavin barked at them, trying to regain some shred of authority. "Don't just stand there. Tell him we have a contract." The lead mover, a burly man with a thick beard, looked at Gavin with disdain. He looked at the police officer. Then he set the box of books down on the floor with a heavy thud. "I am not going to jail for you, buddy," the mover said. He signaled to his partner. "Pack it up. We are taking it back to the truck." "No," Marissa shrieked. "You can't. The truck is full. We have nowhere to go." "That is not my problem, lady," the mover said. "My contract says I move you in. If the cops say I can't move you in, then I am moving you out. I get paid by the hour either way." He picked up the box of books he had just carried in and turned around, walking back toward the front door. The tide turned. It was visceral. The flow of objects that had been violating my space suddenly reversed. The couch that was blocking my view was lifted up. The wardrobe in the hallway was tilted back onto the dolly. The fast food trash on the counter was swept into a bag by the younger mover, who clearly just wanted to go home. Gavin stood in the middle of the living room, vibrating with rage. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a hatred I had never seen before. It wasn't just anger. It was the fury of a man who had been exposed. He had spent his whole life pretending to be a king, and I had just shown the world he was a jester. "You are going to regret this," he hissed at me, low enough so the officer wouldn't hear. "You are destroying this family over a house. You are selfish. You are cold." "I am the owner," I replied simply. "Get your vinyl records off my floor." He scrambled to grab his stack of albums before the movers could toss them into a bin. He looked pathetic, clutching his Beatles records to his chest, his blazer rumpled, his hair messing up as he sweated. I looked out the front window. The commotion, the police lights, and the shouting had done exactly what Marissa feared. Across the street, the heavy velvet drapes of the house opposite mine had parted. An elderly woman was standing there, phone in hand, watching, 2 houses down. A man washing his car had stopped and was openly staring, his hose dripping water onto his driveway. A jogger had slowed to a walk, taking out earbuds to listen to the drama. These were the elites Gavin wanted to impress. These were the neighbors he wanted to dazzle with his brand. And their first introduction to the Cross family was not a housewarming party with champagne. It was a police eviction. Marissa saw them too. She saw the neighbors watching. The shame hit her harder than the legal threat. She grabbed her purse and the bag of fast food, shielding her face with her hand. "Let's go. Gavin," she sobbed, grabbing her children by the hands. "Just let's go. She is crazy. She is evil. We don't want to stay here anyway." She dragged the confused children out the door, keeping her head down as she passed the police officer. She didn't look at me. Gavin lingered for one last second. He looked at the high ceilings, the quartz countertops, the view of the valley bathed in the golden afternoon light. He looked at the life he felt he deserved, the life he felt I had stolen from him simply by earning it. "This isn't over," he said. "It is for you," I said. "Goodbye, Gavin." He turned and walked out. The police officer followed him onto the porch, standing guard to ensure they actually left. I stood alone in the center of my living room. The door was still open. The cold wind blew in, chasing away the smell of grease and cheap cologne. The movers were efficient. They were stripping the house of the invasion with rapid speed. I watched them carry the last of the boxes out. I watched Gavin arguing with the truck driver in the driveway, waving his arms, probably trying to negotiate a discount for the inconvenience. I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was a text from the officer's dispatch, confirming the incident report number. I took a deep breath. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. It was the pounding of a runner who had just crossed the finish line. I had humiliated them. I had exposed them. But more importantly, I had established a precedent. The line in the sand was no longer a metaphor. It was a police report. The sound of tires screeching against asphalt tore through the afternoon air, sharper and more desperate than the arrival of the police had been. I did not need to turn my head to know who it was. I knew the engine note of that silver Mercedes sedan as well as I knew my own heartbeat. It was my mother's car, a vehicle she could barely afford to lease but refused to give up because it was essential to the image she projected to the world. Evelyn Hartman had arrived. She did not park. She abandoned the vehicle in the middle of the street, blocking the driveway, her door flying open before the engine had even fully ceased its rotation. She was running before her feet hit the pavement, her expensive heels clacking violently against the road. "Brielle!" she screamed. It was a sound that usually made my stomach clench in conditioned fear, a reflex built over 3 decades. But today, with the cold wind on my face and the officer standing next to me, I felt nothing but a detached curiosity. "Brielle, what have you done?" she shrieked, rushing up the driveway, her coat flapping behind her like the wings of a predatory bird. "Have you lost your mind? Send them away. Send them away right now." She ignored the movers who were wheeling the refrigerator back toward the truck. She ignored Gavin, who was sulking by the flower bed. She made a beeline straight for me, her eyes wild, her hands reaching out as if she intended to physically shake the obedience back into my body. "Mom, stop," I said, holding my ground. She didn't stop. She lunged at me, her manicured fingers clawing for the folder of legal documents I was holding against my chest. She knew, instinctively, she knew that the paper was the source of my power, and if she could just destroy the paper, she could restore the hierarchy. "Give me that," she hissed, grabbing the edge of the envelope. "You ungrateful, selfish child. How dare you call the police on your own blood?" "Ma'am, step back." The police officer moved faster than I expected. He stepped between us, using his large frame to create a physical barrier. He did not touch her, but he held up a hand that commanded instant compliance. "Do not touch the complainant," the officer ordered, his voice dropping an octave into a warning growl. "You need to lower your voice and step away from the homeowner." Evelyn froze. The presence of a uniformed officer finally registered in her panic-blinded vision. She looked at his badge, his gun belt, and then at the neighbors who were now standing on their porches, openly watching the spectacle. In an instant, the transformation happened. It was a performance I had watched 1,000 times, but never ceased to marvel at. The hysterical, clawing mother vanished. In her place stood Evelyn the martyr, the misunderstood matriarch of a respectable family. She smoothed her hair, she adjusted her coat, she forced a tremble into her lip and clasped her hands together in a plea for sympathy. "Officer, I am so sorry," she said, her voice trembling with a perfectly manufactured fragility. I am a mother. I am distraught. You have to understand. This is a terrible misunderstanding, a terrible, terrible mistake." She gestured toward the house, encompassing the chaos with a sweeping hand. "This is a family dispute. It has spiraled out of control because my daughter is, well, she is under a lot of stress at work. She is not thinking clearly." She took a step toward the officer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, trying to recruit him into her reality. "You see, this house, it is a family project. We all decided on it. Brielle bought it. Yes, technically, but she bought it for us. She bought it to replace the family home we sold years ago. It is held in her name for tax purposes, but it belongs to the family. She is confused. She thinks she can just throw her sister out. But this was the plan all along." It was a lie so audacious, so complete, that for a second, the air left my lungs. She was trying to override the deed with a narrative. She was trying to tell the law that my signature meant nothing because I was merely a vessel for the family's will. "That is a lie," I said. Evelyn whipped her head around, her eyes flashing with genuine venom before softening back into sad mother mode. "Brielle, darling, Don't lie to the officer. You know we discussed this. You know this house is for everyone. I never agreed to that, I said, looking her dead in the eye. I never said this was for everyone. I said I was buying a home. For me. You assumed it was for everyone because you cannot conceive of a world where I own something that you cannot take. I am your mother, she cried, playing to the audience of neighbors. I made promises. I told Gavin he could set up his business here. I told Marissa she could finally have a garden for the children. Do you know how humiliating it is for me to have to tell them you are going back on my word? You do not have the right to promise for me, I said. My voice was not loud, but it was hard as granite. You do not have the right to use my assets to fulfill your fantasies. You promised them my house because you had nothing left of your own to give them. I gave them everything, Evelyn sobbed. And I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? By embarrassing us in front of the whole town? You gave me nothing but debt, I said. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Excuse me? Evelyn gasped, clutching her pearls in a gesture so cliché it was almost comical. Twist number 3, Mom, I thought to myself, though I spoke the words aloud for the officer and the neighbors to hear. Let's talk about the family plan. Let's talk about why the deed is in my name only. It is because no bank in America would lend money to you, or to Dad, or to Gavin. I turned to the officer. Officer, my mother claims this is a shared asset, but she forgets to mention that 3 years ago. She took out a credit card in my name without my knowledge and ran up $15,000 in debt to pay for Gavin's failed landscaping business. She forgets that I am the one who paid off the family car when it was about to be repossessed. She forgets that every time Gavin fails, she comes to me to fill the hole in the bank account. Evelyn's face drained of color. The polite lady mask was cracking. Brielle, stop it. Private matters. It is not private anymore, I said, stepping closer to her. You are standing on my driveway, telling the police that I'm confused. I am not confused. I am the only one who has been keeping the ledger. You gave them the key to this house not because it was yours to give, but because you treat my life like a spare parts yard for their failures. You handed them the key as if you were transferring ownership, because in your mind, I don't exist as a person. I only exist as a resource. Marissa, who had been huddled by the car with the children, suddenly burst forward. She realized her mother was losing the argument, and she needed to deploy the ultimate shield. What about the kids? Brielle? She wailed, tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time. Tears of panic. Look at them. They are crying. We gave up our apartment. They don't have bedrooms. We have nowhere to sleep tonight. Are you really going to let your niece and nephew sleep in a motel because you are obsessed with your boundaries? The officer looked at the children. He shifted uncomfortably. This was the part where the manipulator usually won. The appeal to the welfare of the innocent. I looked at my niece and nephew. They looked scared. They were confused, and it broke my heart. But I knew that if I yielded now, if I let them in just for tonight, they would never leave. The night would become a week, then a month, then a lifetime. I am not the one who made them homeless, I said, keeping my eyes on Marissa. You are. You gave up your apartment without a signed lease here. You packed their lives into a truck without asking the owner of the house if you could move in. You gambled with their stability because you thought you could bully me into submission. Their lack of a bedroom tonight is not my cruelty. It is your negligence. Marissa gasped, looking as if I had slapped her. You are a monster. No, the officer interrupted. His voice was firm. He had heard enough. She is the homeowner. He turned to Evelyn and Gavin. Folks, I am going to say this one last time. There is one name on the deed. That individual has revoked consent for you to be here. The family plan is a civil dispute that you can take up in court, but right now, on this property, it is a trespassing issue. But we can't leave yet, Evelyn pleaded, her eyes darting to the house across the street, where the elderly neighbor was now joined by her husband on the porch. Look at the neighbors. They are watching. Brielle, please, just let us bring the boxes in for a few hours, just until dark. We can pretend to have dinner, and then we will figure something out. Don't make us drive away with the police watching. It is humiliating. The Schmidts across the street know me from the club." "The deadline is now," the officer said, checking his watch. "The movers are almost done unloading the items back onto the truck. Once that truck is loaded, you all need to be off the property. If you are not off the property in 15 minutes, I will have to issue citations." 15 minutes? Gavin choked out. "I can't organize a storage unit in 15 minutes. "Then I suggest you start driving," the officer said impassively. Evelyn looked at me. For the first time in her life, she looked at me not as a daughter to be commanded, but as a stranger who held a weapon she didn't understand. She saw the papers in my hand. She saw the police officer at my shoulder. She saw the neighbors whispering behind their hands. She realized that her greatest weapon, the shame of what people will think, had backfired. By bringing the chaos to my doorstep, she had exposed the dysfunction of the family to the very audience she tried so hard to impress. "You have ruined us," Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling with genuine horror. "You have aired our dirty laundry to the world." "I just opened the blinds, Mom," I said, gesturing to the glass walls of the house. "You are the ones who put on the show." I turned away from her. I didn't want to see her face anymore. I walked back toward the porch, leaving them to scramble in the dirt of their own making. I realized then that the only way to break the cycle of manipulation was to drag it out of the shadows of family privacy and into the harsh, unforgiving light of the public record. They could no longer lie to me, because now, witnesses were watching. The 15-minute deadline hung over the driveway like a guillotine blade, and Gavin Cross was flailing. He was witnessing the disintegration of his self-image in real time, and his reaction was to double down on the delusion that he was a man of importance who was simply momentarily inconvenienced by small-minded people. He paced in tight circles on the asphalt, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice pitched deliberately loud so that the police officer, the movers, and the neighbors across the street could hear him. He was performing a one-man play titled The Misunderstood Tycoon. "Yes, Jim, look, there is a slight delay on the logistics front," Gavin barked into his phone, waving his free hand authoritatively at nothing. "The venue I selected has some zoning compliance issues. Typical bureaucratic red tape. We are pivoting to the secondary site. I need you to prep the team for a soft launch next week instead." He paused, nodding as if listening to a subordinate agree with his genius. "Exactly. Flexibility is key. Just make sure the capital is liquid. I will be sending over the new coordinates shortly." He pulled the phone away from his ear to switch to speaker, a move intended to show everyone that he was indeed in the middle of high-level negotiations. It was a fatal error. "Gavin?" a voice crackled through the speaker, loud and tinny in the crisp afternoon air. It was not the deferential voice of a partner. It was the angry, gravelly voice of a man who had reached his limit. "I do not care about a soft launch. You still haven't paid the deposit for the equipment rental from last month. Do not call me again until you have wired the $3,000 you owe me. I am serious. Man, I am filing a small claims suit on Monday." The silence that followed was absolute. Gavin scrambled to hit the mute button, his thumb fumbling over the screen. But the damage was done. The lie had been stripped naked. The partners were creditors. The capital was debt. The police officer, who had been watching with folded arms, let out a short, dry snort of amusement. Even the neighbors across the street seemed to lean in closer, absorbing the delicious confirmation that the man in the blazer was a fraud. Gavin turned purple. He shoved the phone into his pocket, glaring at the officer as if the law enforcement presence was responsible for the person on the other end of the line. "Misunderstanding," Gavin muttered, wiping sweat from his upper lip. "Contractor dispute. You know how vendors are." But no one was listening to him anymore. The movers had returned from the house, carrying the centerpiece of Gavin's ego, a large, garish cabinet with gold leaf trim that he claimed was an antique from a French chateau, but which I knew he had bought at an estate sale for new money wannabes. Because they were rushing to meet the officer's deadline, the movers were not being gentle. As they navigated the slope of the driveway, the dolly hit a loose piece of gravel. The cabinet tipped. The gold legs scraped violently against the concrete for 3 feet, leaving a long white scar of raw plaster and a trail of gold flakes. "Hey!" Gavin screamed, running toward them. "Watch it! That is museum quality! You are ruining the finish!" "Truck is full, buddy," the mover grunted, not even looking down at the damage. "We are just jamming it in wherever it fits. You want white glove service? You pay the premium invoice. You book the economy package." They shoved the scratched cabinet into the back of the rental truck next to a pile of garbage bags filled with clothes. The juxtaposition was poetic. His museum-quality life was being revealed as nothing more than a chaotic heap of junk. Marissa was crumbling. She was no longer the smug sister who had eaten pizza on my counter. She was crouching on the pavement, frantically gathering the plastic swords and action figures her children had scattered during their brief invasion. Her face was a beacon of humiliation. Every time she threw a toy into a bag, she glanced up at the neighbors. She saw Mrs. Schmidt across the street whispering to her husband. She saw the jogger who had stopped to watch. She knew that by tomorrow morning, the entire homeowners association would know that the Cross family had been kicked out by the police. "Get in the car," she hissed at the children, her voice trembling. "Just get in the car. Stop crying." She dragged my nephew by his arm, roughly shoving him into the back seat of their sedan. She was angry, but not at herself. She needed a target, and I was too formidable right now with the police beside me. So Evelyn took over. My mother, realizing that her respectable matriarch act had failed, switched seamlessly to the role of the beleaguered victim surrounded by incompetence. She needed to distance herself from the disaster she had orchestrated. She turned on Marissa first. "Honestly, Marissa, why did you have to bring so many boxes?" Evelyn scolded, her voice shrill. "I told you to keep it light. If you hadn't made such a spectacle with the moving truck, we could have handled this quietly. You always have to make everything so dramatic." Marissa stopped loading the trunk, staring at her mother in disbelief. "You told us to move in. You said Brielle was okay with it." "I said we would massage the situation," Evelyn snapped. Then she whipped her head toward me. "And you, Brielle, look at this. Look at your sister. Look at your brother-in-law. Are you happy? Is this what you wanted? To see your family broken on the pavement?" She gestured at the scene. The scratched furniture, the crying children, the police cruiser. "You could have just said yes. You could have just nodded and let us stay for dinner. We could have figured it out. But you had to be right. You had to be the winner. You are so cold. Brielle, you have ice in your veins where a heart should be." I stood on the bottom step of my porch. I did not scream back. I did not defend myself. I did not point out that figuring it out meant me paying for everything forever. I simply held my phone up. The red recording light was steady. I was capturing every word, every blame shift, every lie. I knew that in a week, Evelyn would tell the rest of the extended family that I had attacked them. She would say I was hysterical. She would say I was cruel. But I would have the tape. "Are you recording me?" Evelyn gasped, seeing the phone. "How dare you? This is a private family moment." "This is a police matter," I said calmly, "and I am documenting the removal of unauthorized persons from my property." Evelyn let out a sound of pure frustration, a guttural growl that was entirely undignified. She realized she had lost control of the narrative. She turned on her heel, marched to her Mercedes, and got in. She slammed the door so hard the vehicle rocked. The movers slammed the back of the rental truck. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Marissa got into the passenger seat of the sedan, refusing to look at me. Gavin was the last to go. He stood by the driver's door of his car. He looked at the house, my house, one last time. His eyes were not filled with regret. They were filled with a dark, brooding promise of vengeance. He felt he had been wronged. He felt that the universe, and I, owed him that house. He walked over to where I stood, stopping just outside the range where the officer would intervene. "You think you won," Gavin spat, his voice low and venomous. You think a piece of paper makes you safe? You need us. Brielle, you have no one else. You are going to rot in this big empty box all alone. And when you come crawling back, begging to be part of the family again, do not expect us to open the door." He leaned in, his eyes narrowing. "You will regret fighting the family. Mark my words." "Goodbye, Gavin," I said. He sneered, got into the car, and started the engine. It sputtered, a perfect auditory metaphor for his life. Before catching, the caravan of failure began to move. First Evelyn's Mercedes, peeling away with an aggressive screech, then the rental truck, lumbering and dirty. Finally, Gavin's sedan, packed to the roof with the debris of their entitlement. I watched them turn the corner and disappear down the hill. The police officer let out a long breath. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I am. Do you want me to stick around for a few minutes, just in case they circle back?" "No," I said. "They won't come back today. They are too embarrassed." The officer nodded, touched the brim of his hat, and walked to his cruiser. When he drove away, silence finally descended on 1210 Cedar Ridge Lane. It was a heavy silence, the kind that follows a storm. I stood on the concrete steps, the wind tangling my hair. My hands were not shaking. My heart was not racing. Gavin thought his threat scared me. He thought the fear of being alone would break me. He didn't understand that I wasn't afraid of being alone. I had been alone in that room full of people for 30 years. And he certainly didn't know about the second envelope in my safe. He didn't know that today was just the skirmish. He thought he could sue me. He thought he could guilt me. He had no idea that I had done a forensic accounting of the last decade of our finances. He had no idea that I knew exactly where the investment capital from Grandma's estate had really gone. I turned and looked at my front door. It was closed. It was locked. And for the first time in my life, I held the only key. I wasn't done. But for tonight, the castle was secure. The silence of the house was short-lived. It was broken not by intruders, but by the shrill, demanding ring of my cell phone at 8 in the morning on Wednesday. I knew before I looked that it was the second wave of the assault. It was my father, Howard. Howard Hartman was a man who had spent 40 years hiding behind his wife's skirt, nodding in agreement with whatever reality Evelyn constructed. He rarely called me. If he did, it was usually to ask how to reset the router or to vaguely wish me a happy birthday a day late. I answered the phone. I did not say hello. "How could you?" His voice cracked through the speaker. He did not sound like a father. He sounded like a lieutenant delivering a message from the general. "Your mother has been up all night. Brielle, she is devastated. She is inconsolable. Do you have any idea what you have done to this family?" I stood in my kitchen, brewing a pot of coffee in the silence I had fought so hard to secure. "I stopped a burglary, Dad." "Do not use those legal words with me," Howard shouted, a rare burst of volume that I suspected was for Evelyn's benefit, as she was likely listening in the background. "They are not burglars. They are your sister and your brother, and you threw them out on the street like garbage. My grandchildren slept on an air mattress in a motel last night because of you. A motel. Brielle, are you proud of that?" "I did not tell them to terminate their lease," I said, pouring the coffee. "I did not tell them to load a truck without a destination. They gambled on my compliance, and they lost." "You need to apologize," Howard demanded. "You need to call your sister, apologize, and give them the code to the front door. Right now, if you fix this today, maybe, just maybe, your mother will forgive you in time for Thanksgiving." "No," I said. "What did you say?" "I said no. And Dad, if you continue to harass me, you will be included in the cease and desist order I am filing this afternoon." I hung up. I did not feel the crushing guilt they expected. I felt a cold, sharp clarity. By noon, the digital war had begun. My phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. I didn't need to open Facebook or Instagram to know what was happening. My cousins, my aunts, the extended network of gossip that fueled my family. They were all sharing the same story. The story was that Brielle, the wealthy, heartless career woman, had lured her struggling sister to a new city and then locked her out in the cold for no reason other than cruelty. I saw the headlines of their posts in the preview bar. Family is supposed to support family. Heartbroken for my grandbabies. Some people love money more than people. I did not comment. I did not post a defense. I did not engage. Engaging was what they wanted. They wanted a fight in the mud. I was not interested in mud. I was interested in the concrete reality of the law. At 2 p.m, I walked into the office of Rourke and Associates. Caleb Rourke was waiting for me, a file already open on his desk. "I saw the police report," Caleb said, skipping the pleasantries. "Criminal trespass. Officer Miller filed it. You have a case number. That is excellent leverage." I sat down and placed my phone and a flash drive on his desk. "This is the audio from the confrontation. I have Gavin on record admitting he intended to stay indefinitely without paying rent. I have him admitting my mother orchestrated the entry. I also have photos of the damage to the driveway and the interior walls." Caleb took the drive. "And the list of individuals to be served?" "Everyone," I said. "Evelyn Hartman, Howard Hartman, Marissa Cross, Gavin Cross, and I want to add my Aunt Linda, who has been sending me threatening text messages all morning." "We will send certified letters of no trespass to all of them," Caleb said, making a note. "If they step foot on the curb, they get arrested. No warnings." I nodded. "I also need a locksmith, a good one, and a security team." "Already arranged," Caleb said. "They are meeting you at the property at 4. High-definition cameras, motion sensors, and a biometric lock. If anyone tries to use a duplicate key, the system will lock down and alert the precinct." He paused, looking down at a piece of paper on his desk. His expression shifted from professional to grave. "Brielle," he said, "there is something else. While we were digging into the correspondence regarding the title transfer to ensure everything was clean, my paralegal found an email chain in the broker's spam filter." "What email?" I asked. Caleb slid a printed sheet across the desk. "This was sent 5 days before your closing date. It is from an email address belonging to Gavin Cross." I picked up the paper. The timestamp was a week ago. The subject line read, "Access request. Hartman closing." I read the body of the email. "Dear Agent, I am writing on behalf of my sister-in-law, Brielle Hartman. She is swamped with work and asked me to pick up the spare keys and the garage remote prior to the closing date, so we can begin moving some staging items in. Please let me know when I can swing by the office. She has authorized me to sign for them." My blood ran cold. "He tried to get the keys from the broker," I whispered. "He tried to get in before I even signed the papers." "Luckily, the broker followed protocol and ignored it because it didn't come from your address," Caleb said. "But Brielle, look at the date. This was not a spontaneous decision your mother made because she was overcome with excitement on moving day. This was a premeditated attempt to gain possession of the property before you even took legal title." I stared at the paper. The narrative of, "we just want to be together," dissolved completely. This was a heist. Gavin had planned to occupy the house before I even owned it. He wanted to be sitting on that sofa when I walked in, establishing squatter's rights before the ink was dry on my deed. They had been planning this for weeks. While I was agonizing over down payments and interest rates, they were planning the invasion. They viewed my hard work not as an achievement to be celebrated, but as a carcass to be scavenged. "This changes things," I said. My voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "It establishes malice," Caleb agreed. "It proves this was a coordinated scheme to defraud you of the use of your property. We can use this if they try to sue for reliance or claim you promised them housing." I folded the paper and put it in my purse. "Do not just use it for defense. Caleb, keep it. I want to build a file so heavy that when I drop it, they never get up again." I stood up. "Send the letters. Upgrade the locks. And Caleb, prepare the final document regarding the trust structure, the one we discussed." "Are you sure?" Caleb asked. "That is the nuclear option. Once you file that, You legally sever the financial tie completely. They will never be able to claim a cent from you again." "I am sure," I said. I left the office and drove back to Cedar Ridge. The locksmith was already there, drilling out the core of the front door. I watched him work. I watched the old lock, the one my mother had violated, fall onto the concrete. I was done playing the victim. I was done being the cold daughter. If they wanted a villain, I would show them what a villain actually looked like. A villain was someone who stole. A villain was someone who lied. I was neither. I was the reckoning. I walked into my house, the smell of fresh metal shavings in the air. I looked at the spot where Gavin had stood, claiming he would pay me back when he succeeded. I knew exactly how I was going to end this. I wasn't just going to lock them out. I was going to ensure that the Bank of Brielle was closed for business, permanently, and I was going to do it in a way that left no room for interpretation. I sat down at my kitchen island and opened my laptop. I had one more email to write, and one final meeting to arrange, but not with them, with the future. The digital clock on my security monitor read 10 in the morning exactly. It had been 7 days since the police removed my family from the driveway, 7 days of silence. But I knew the silence was not peace. It was merely the deep breath before the scream. I was standing in my kitchen, drinking tea, when the motion sensors at the front gate triggered. I looked at the high-definition screen. It was not just one car, it was 3. Evelyn's silver Mercedes was in the lead. Behind her was Gavin's battered sedan, and behind that was a minivan I recognized belonging to my Aunt Linda and Uncle Bob, the self-appointed moral arbiters of the extended family who usually only appeared at funerals to judge the flower arrangements. They were getting out of the cars. They were not carrying boxes this time. They were carrying props. Evelyn held a Tupperware container, likely filled with her peace-offering casserole. Gavin was wearing a humble sweater, looking distinctively less like a CEO and more like a repentant son. Marissa was holding the children's hands. Aunt Linda was clutching a Bible. It was a stage play. They were staging a family reconciliation right on my front porch, hoping that the pressure of an audience would force me to open the door. They counted on the fact that Brielle, the daughter, would be too polite to leave her elderly aunt standing in the wind. I watched them approach the door. I watched Gavin reach out to ring the doorbell. Ding dong. "Brielle!" Evelyn's voice came through the intercom, sweet and trembling. "Brielle, open up. Honey, we brought Aunt Linda. We just want to talk. We want to pray over the house and start fresh. No lawyers, just family." I did not walk to the door. I did not press the talk button on the intercom. I picked up my phone and dialed the direct line for Officer Miller, the contact he had given me on the day of the eviction. "This is Brielle Hartman," I said. "The individuals named in the no trespass orders served 3 days ago are currently on my porch. They are banging on the door." "We are en route," Miller said. "Do not open the door." "I have no intention of doing so," I replied. I watched the screen. I saw Gavin looking at his watch, his repentant mask slipping into irritation. I saw Aunt Linda peering into the side windows, shielding her eyes, looking for signs of life. They thought I was hiding. They thought I was cowering in the bathroom, crippled by the guilt of excluding them. They did not know I was standing 10 feet away, calmly watching their performance crumble. 6 minutes later, the performance ended abruptly. 2 police cruisers rolled up the driveway, lights flashing silently. The shock on Aunt Linda's face was worth every penny I had spent on the security system. She clutched her Bible to her chest as if the officers were demons. This time, there was no negotiation. There was no reading of deeds. The officers stepped out with zip ties on their belts. They knew the drill. The warning had already been served via certified mail to every single person standing on that porch. I watched as the officer approached Gavin. I saw Gavin try to smile, try to offer a handshake, but the officer simply pointed to the street. I saw Evelyn drop her casserole. It shattered on the concrete, lasagna splattering across the welcome mat. While they were arguing with the police outside, my lawyer, Caleb, fired the digital shot I had saved for this exact moment. At 10:15, a mass email went out to Evelyn, Gavin, Marissa, and every relative they had CC'd on their gossip threads. It was a notification of a new legal structure. I had not just bought the house, I had transferred the property into an irrevocable asset protection trust. The document stated clearly that the property was now owned by a legal entity that strictly prohibited unauthorized usage, regardless of familial relation. It also contained a clause that Caleb had drafted with ruthless precision. Any further attempts to force entry or harass the beneficiary, me, would result in an immediate civil lawsuit for emotional distress and legal fees, with damages estimated at $50,000. I watched Aunt Linda check her phone in the driveway. I saw her face go pale. She showed the screen to Uncle Bob. Money? It always came down to money. Linda and Bob were not willing to lose their retirement savings for Evelyn's drama. I saw them back away. I saw Linda say something sharp to Evelyn, shake her head, and get back into her minivan. They reversed down the driveway without looking back. The audience had left the theater. Evelyn stood alone with Gavin and Marissa. She looked at the shattered casserole. She looked at the police officer who was now writing a citation. She looked at the camera lens, knowing I was watching. She realized then that the Poor Mother Act did not work on a security system. The camera did not care about her tears. The law did not care about her intentions. The police escorted them to their cars. There was no screaming this time, just a heavy, suffocating shame. In the days that followed, the fallout was absolute. Gavin's brand did not survive the week. In a town like Cedar Ridge, the only thing that traveled faster than light was a scandal involving the police. The neighbors had talked. The story of the CEO being escorted off a property for squatting made its way to the country club, then to the local business association. The investors he had been courting suddenly stopped returning his calls. The veneer of success he had spent years polishing was scratched away, revealing the desperate grifter underneath. He tried to spin it online, claiming he was the victim of a vindictive relative, but Caleb sent a cease and desist order regarding defamation. Attached with the police report number, Gavin deleted the posts within an hour. Evelyn tried to call me one last time from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to it later. She didn't scream. She sounded old. She said, "You have your house, Brielle. I hope it keeps you warm, because you have nothing else." I deleted the message. She was wrong. I didn't just have a house. I had a life. I walked to the front door and opened it. The air was crisp and clean. I looked at the stain where the lasagna had fallen. I would have to power wash that later. It was a small chore. I didn't mind. I looked out at the view. The sun was setting over the valley, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. It was quiet. There was no television blaring cartoons. There was no Gavin bragging about a deal that didn't exist. There was no Evelyn critiquing my curtains. There was just me. I realized that for 34 years, I had confused peace with numbness. I thought that if I just went numb, if I just absorbed their chaos, I would find peace. But peace wasn't the absence of feeling. Peace was the presence of boundaries. I had drawn a line in the concrete, and for the first time in the history of the Hartman family, the line had held. "Family is not a license to take," I said aloud to the empty air. "If you want to be invited in, you have to learn how to knock." I stepped back inside. I closed the heavy door. The lock engaged with a solid, definitive thud that echoed through the hallway. It was the sound of a vault closing. It was the sound of a chapter ending. I walked into my living room, the one with the high ceilings and the perfect light. I sat down on my sofa, the one I had chosen, the one that had no stains, and I watched the sun go down. I was alone, and it was the most beautiful feeling in the world. Some people think freedom is a grand explosion. It is not. Freedom is simply the ability to lock your own door and know, with absolute certainty, that the only people inside are the ones you invited. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to hear your thoughts. Please comment down below and tell me where you are tuning in from. I really want to connect with you all. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this journey with even more people.